Right, hi guys, how are we all doing? So I said last week I was going to try and get a review done on the radar mount that was made for me for my SWAT saddle system by Ryan. However, he is in the process of working on a Mark II and a few other phases in between. So what I've said is I will wait for him to get those to me so that I can give you a long-term review on the original, and then we can have a look at a couple of the little screws, the noise out back. We can have a look at what he's done for the Mark II to make it adaptable to the SWAT system. So Specialized, again, they're a bit naughty. They brought out the SWAT system, which are two bolts at a set distance through the back, and then their original saddles had a nice concave shape that went in, and Ryan machined that perfect so it fitted in. However, Specialized then decided that actually their tolerances are going to be out on their saddles, so you can have the same saddle and the tolerances just aren't the same, not for the bolt width but the shape of the saddle around it. It's just poor moulding really, so no excuse there on their behalf. But Ryan's made a few little tweaks to it so that it should go between the saddles better. So when we've got Mark II, we will do the review on Mark I, and I will introduce the new one, and then I will probably put my Arcs saddle back on this bike so I can ride it for a bit for Ryan to get some feedback on it and see how it performs. But what I wanted to do today was a introduction to gears again. So I said to you that obviously all my old content, which was a lot of videos on how to set up gears, what gears are, how they work, has been wiped. And I keep getting people saying, Jace, I really like the fact that your videos were so easy to follow and to the point. So I'm going to start again, and what I'm going to start again with is how the gears work properly on a road bike, because still to this day I get people saying I don't quite understand what the trim setting does for me, or I press my trim setting and it does nothing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through what trim is. So obviously we'll start really simple. We'll start with the road bikes. Let's turn it around so you can see the levers, the gear change at the top. The road bike versus a mountain bike, quite simply, let's turn you back around a minute. The gears to change them are in the levers, versus mountain bikes where you'll either have the thumb triggers, or some people still like twist grip, which was made by SRAM originally. Right back, called grip shift, right back in the 90s, and it's evoluted, and believe it or not there's even versions now for the really high-end stuff, but the insides are all really high-end titanium ball bearings, and you've got magnesium clay. It's really exact and nice, but we're going to stay away from that side of it. We're just going to talk about road bikes on this channel at the moment. I have got my mountain bike over there, so one day we will go through mountain bikes, but they don't have the trim setting like these. So what is trim then? Well, trim is dead simple. You've got your front derailleur here, and on most bikes, unless you're running a 1x, you'll have the two chain rings. So you've got your outer chain ring and your inner chain ring. So most people would assume that their front shifter has only got one click up, one click down, when in fact it hasn't, because what you've got to take into account for is that you've obviously got quite a wide range on the rear cassette. So as you're looking at the rear cassette, where it's quite wide, as the chain goes up and the chain goes down, the actual angle of the chain will come across and in. And we'll go through this in a minute and I'll show you on the bike. Now, as your chain comes out, if you're on the little ring like we are now, basically what happens is your chain is moving this way towards me, like that, and you can hear it starts to hit the front mech. So when you're in the lower gear, your trim setting will be a very gentle little click up, just enough to move the front mech about 2 mil across. Just so then, if you are being naughty and kind of almost cross chaining on the back, and cross chaining is going small to small or big to big. Yeah. So if you're doing either of those, as your chain comes across the front mech, it's going to start touching the outside of it like this. So then you bring the front mech out again and your chain clears. And that's all it is. but trim works the other direction as well. So when you're on big, as you start going up the cassette at the rear and the chain starts moving this way and starts hitting the chain like that side, the front mech there, you need a trim setting to bring the mech that side of the chain. So if this is the chain here, your mech goes dink, but it doesn't go enough to pull the chain down onto the smaller ring. And that's all trim is. Now, trim setup is vital on correct tension on the cable. And also it's vital that you have on the newer mechs and the last generation of the older style mechs, right inside this little hole here. So if we get our Allen key, go around here, right inside that little hole there in the mech is a little grub screw. And that little grub screw is meant to, as you turn it, come out and sit on the frame. Now, if it's sitting on raw carbon or paint, you get Shimano give you nice little stickers which are metal on the outside, and you stick them on so the grub screw presses on that, and as you screw it in, it tightens it. Be careful though, if you screw it too tight, you'll actually start pushing the mech at an angle. So where you're trying to get it is so it's just about to start moving the mech and stop. And that gives the mech not only the one little Allen key up here support, it allows, as the mech's pushing out, it's got something to physically push into rather than it just being on the bolt on the top. And it makes for a lot more steady mech. It also means that if you haven't got that set, when you do your trim, the mech actually flexes a bit inwards, so you end up with like only a half a mil of trim, when really you want the full movement of the trim setting. So that is really crucial for trim. Cable tension is as well, but we're going to go through cable tension on another vid, which will be a deep look into the front mech. This is purely an explanation of trim and what is it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take you around this side, and I'm going to show you what trim is, actually how it works and how we operate it on the levers. So stand by. Right, so here we are guys, up at the top ends. Obviously that's your front changer there, but what we're going to look at is imagine how this is your front lever. So in a minute I'm going to show you that you use the smaller button at the back, but on this side, look, to basically make your trim work, and it really is just a gentle. So I'll do that again so you can hear it. That's trim. That is a full shift. Gentle, doesn't take a lot. So what are we seeing down here when we do that? Well, at the moment I'm doing something naughty, so I'm cross training, look. So big, but of course as you come up the back, your chain's moving across. I'm doing this to exaggerate the fact that it's now literally sat on the front mech. And there you go, that's my rear mech at its maximum. I've still got quite a bit of slack there, look. As I run my chains as slack as you can. I'd rather run my chain as slack as possible rather than tight as possible, because you are safe then if you ever do cross chain, which some people do, and I'm quite prone to doing because I'm naughty like that. So front mech, excuse the bike, she gets used. So let's have a look from above and let's see what trim does. There you go, that is a good amount of trim. And now you can see in here the chain's got a nice 2mm gap. If I come back up, the chain's now touching, gap. Right, let me just get something to point you where we're looking at. Okay, so get it in focus. So the gap you're looking for was in here. So this is trim when you're on the top. So that would be all the way out, no gap. Excuse me if I'm wobbling around a bit. So no gap there now. Now we've got a nice gap there, you can see through, about a 2mm gap. Right, what we're going to do now is we're going to go shift the other way. Look how filthy my bike is. Right, so now this side, now you can see, if we can do this without the tyre getting the camera, that you've got a black friction plate in here, which is plastic. Is it going to focus? It's focusing on my dirty floor, there you go. So that's on the black friction plate at the moment. And there you go. So that's now the trim. So that's now not touching. So I'm in small, big, not touching. But my trim, if I was to do my trim, there you go, 2mm. Now, where that comes into play is as you shift down at the back. So let's give it a few clicks. And you can see now the chain has moved really offline, and eventually the chain will start coming closer and closer to the outside. I'm just doing 2 at a time. So now you can see that is just almost touching, but at the back, look, I've still got quite a few usable gears. And when I say usable, I mean really that when you're on the front is your usable range to there. You tend not to be able to use the 11, and the reason you can't really use the 11 on a lot of bikes is because the distance between here and here, your chainstay distance, is too short. And they do that to make the bikes handle well, to put your weight over the back and give you a nice agile bike. But then what happens is your chain is now coming off at an angle, going across. Now, I've got a 3450 here, so it's not as bad. But what tends to happen is when you've got bigger rings, when you go lower and lower down the back, your chain will start catching the pickup teeth or the pickup ramps on the inside. So you'll be running along, it'll be going kink, kink, and you'll stop and you'll look, you think, what the hell's contacting? And all it is the chain is just about contacting here, in here, the pickup ramps, and it starts to catch. And that is purely because obviously the chain's coming over at an angle. So that's touching there. So this is where obviously, there we go, let's come back, and now we've got a gap there. So now we can see my nice gap there. So that means I can use down to that gear there with the front trim setting up in silence. If I was to forget my trim, it would just about be touching the chain, but only just. Right, let's turn you guys around. Now, that is basically all trim is. It is a real simple system that, because obviously you have movement of the chain at the back going across. I don't know, it's quite, do you know what, I've never ever done this. Let's just get a tape measure. I've never actually figured out how wide your average cassette is. So let's have a look. So I would say that is pretty much 2 inches. So if you think, if your chain at the back is going across from both extremes, a whole 2 inches of movement, you know, when you're looking at the chain from above, that's a hell of an angle to come off. And that's why all the teeth, and that's why Shimano worked for years and years and years in working on the contour, so the shape of the teeth at the front and the shape of the teeth at the back, so that even the jockey wheel, so your bottom jockey wheel is different to the top jockey wheel. And that's why when you replace them with aluminium ones or ceramic speed ones that haven't had the teeth the leading edges profiled, you get a bit of running noise. You'll hear a different style of running noise, and it's not because it's metal on metal, which it might be a little bit, but it's actually because the Shimano teeth are profiled at the bottom, so that as your chain comes off it, it doesn't snag on the chain, so they run smoother. Where the top jockey wheel is actually designed to float a little bit, so as you shift up, if it snags at all, it has a little bit of give before coming up. And also that float allows for a slight bit of kind of mistuning, so it takes away any noise in the running. So actually the original jockey wheels are actually really, really good at what they do. Don't always believe the hype on everything you read, guys. You know, Shimano rings, for example, a lot of people replace them, but there's only 2 companies on the market who make cold forged rings, and that is Shimano and Praxis. What's the advantage of that, you say? Longevity. Their rings last a hell of a lot longer than everyone else, especially when you look at the amount of work that they put into the profiling. Because when you've got old school teeth which weren't profiled, every gear change was quite a lot harder for the chain to achieve, so therefore there'd be a lot more friction involved in each shift. Friction equals wear. So the more silent and the quicker and the smoother that Shimano get with their gear changes, you've got to think actually long term that's good for me, because that's helping prolong the life of all the parts. And that's the bizarre thing about Shimano. If you go to the generation before the Shadow Mechs come in, the generation before was smoother than these, because they had an extra pivot point, an extra spring-loaded point, which helped take pressure away from the shifts. Shadow Mechs don't. Shadow Mechs rely purely on the cage to take it all up. Yeah, so that's why trim's important. It really is that simple, that you've got to have that little bit of movement on your front mech. So as when you're on the bottom, little click up brings the mech out a little bit before your big shift up, and when you're in the top, a little click down allows it to move to one side as you go further up. The amount of times you go out, if you go out riding now and you ride up alongside people and you hear where their chains rubbing, it's either that basically their gears are completely out of whack, or it could be that no one has ever taken the time in a shop to say to them, do you understand what the trim setting is? And the amount of times I've been riding with people and says, do me a favour, just gently tap your front mech. I don't want you to shift it all the way. And they go, what? And a little bit of pressure, and you hear them going, and you go click, and he goes, quiet. And you're like, oh, I never knew that. And then I'm like, well, yeah, you can do it on the way up as well. And it's usually people who are in big, middle to high end at the top because they're cruising along. Because anywhere around about, let's be honest, about 18 miles an hour to about 22, which is a 24, which is a nice cruising speed on the flats. You tend to be in big, middle cassette-ish on the back, up or down, depending on what type of RPM you like to spin. And yeah, you just hear that rub, and it is purely down to trim. So guys, I've waffled on a little bit. But I do like to try and over-explain and simplify as simple as I possibly can what things are. So I thought, being that trim is the one thing that so many people don't get told about, it'd be a good place to start again. And then what I'm going to do is next week we will go through the front mech completely on this bike, because this is the newer style front mech. It's quite a lot different to setup than the old style. So we'll go through that on this bike, then we'll go through the rear mech on this bike, how to get them running nice and smooth, which actually usually means not being completely covered in filth like mine are. So then we can take it from there. Then we'll start on the older style bike. My wife's bike's got the older style gears, and we'll go through the same procedure with those, and then we'll go from there. And we will go on to brake setup for calipers on my wife's bike, and we'll go on to basic brake setup for discs on my bike. And I hope that's okay, guys, and that's how we're going to slowly go on with the channel. I'm not going back into this channel full ball where I do 3 or 4 vlogs a week. I hope you can appreciate that after last time I got stung quite hard for that, and we had some weird and wonderful things going on with stalkers as well. So yeah, we are going to keep this channel nice, cheerful, easy, simple stuff like that. Look after yourself, guys. Ride safe. If you're one of my friends out there who has started riding again after COVID, take it easy, guys. I know a couple of you have said to me that you're using your heart rate monitors to monitor how your resting heart rate is slowly starting to come back down to normal since getting over COVID, and how that when you're under working load you notice a slight increase. It's all coming out. Brilliant things. And I think what I might do is I might have a chat with some of you guys so that I can maybe feed across to more people, you know, people who've actually recovered from COVID as cyclists, things that have helped them. So if you're one of my viewers that's had COVID and you are finding your way back into cycling, I'd like to know from you if you found it no issues at all, or from you if actually you've had to follow a set procedure, whether that's set by the doctors or set by yourselves because you know how your body works because you use heart rate monitors. So I wouldn't mind some feedback from you guys as well. You can PM me that stuff, because I know most of you guys that I know have suffered from it are on my Facebook page. Right, the Love Cycling Facebook page. Guys, I'm getting lots and lots of people asking to join And a few people are saying, yeah, I ride a mountain bike, yeah, I'm happy to abide by the rules, but nobody's ticking the bottom which says, you know, the actual rule. There's another bit that says you will abide by the rules or be blocked, and no one's ticking it. A few people are, and they've been accepted in. If you don't tick all those guys, I don't know if you're a robot, if you're just somebody looking to figure out where we all keep our bikes to come and nick them, etc, etc. So I've got to be a little bit careful. So if you've asked to join and I've said no, there's a good reason that you've probably gone through and answered the first two questions, but not the group rules. You haven't agreed to them, and without that, you're not coming on. So I do try to keep the channel, the page friendly, and whilst I'm not on there every day, if someone contacts me saying, "Oh, Jace, this guy's been an idiot," or "Jace, this guy is spouting political rubbish," my page ain't for that. If you want to bully people, go elsewhere. And if you want to think that you're going to join my page to advertise anything that I think is at all slightly political, go away. This is purely based on cycling. It was nice to see the other day that somebody put on there how that they're using cycling as a right to vote to raise awareness for independence. So I thought that was interesting. That was a great little read, and it was nice to follow the link to see what those guys were up to. But again, that's cycling related. But yeah, all the other stuff, keep it off the channel. Other than that, guys, look after yourselves, ride safe, catch you all soon.